Hello, I want to invite you to yet another important area in our lecture series on research. The focus of our study today is on population. We want to understand how population is understood or conceptualized in the context of research. In this discussion, we want to look at several items, including what population itself means, what is meant by the universe, what is meant by target population, accessible population, sampling frame, sampling unit. Then we shall conclude by looking at units of analysis as they are understood in research and how researchers are required to frame and conceptualize them when they are writing their methodology for research. Welcome. We begin by understanding what is meant by population. And I want us to understand population to mean any collection of specified group of human beings or non-human entities such as objects, educational institutions, time units such as hours, seconds, minutes, geographical areas such as a country or a state, a continent, a subcontinent, and even the universe. Prices of commodities such as prices for clothing, food items, electronic items, motor vehicles, among others. Population might also simply mean a unit of analysis, rather an entity, such as salaries of individuals. Population can be finite or infinite, or it can be homogeneous or heterogeneous. When we talk about population as being finite, we mean, or we are referring to a number of units which can be determined with certainty, such as going to a university and counting the number of students in that university and giving an exact figure, such as 20,000, or going to a soccer stadium where fans are watching a soccer match or a football match and counting the number of fans in the stadium and giving it, say, as 5,000. Finite population might also be going to a hospital and counting the number of patients admitted and giving it a definite number, such as, say, 1,000 patients, or going to a supermarket and counting the number of customers doing shopping at any one time and giving it a number, say, 50. Then we have what we call infinite population. An infinite population is one that counting it and coming up with a definite number becomes impractical, if not possible. For instance, the number of stars in the sky can be quite cumbersome to be counted and the exact number given. or the number of fish in the ocean, the number can be huge, and even as counting begins, new ones are hatched, and therefore the population might not be easily determinable. Or sand in the ocean bed or in the seabed. Again, that one can be quite cumbersome to count and come up with a definite number. So when you talk about infinite population, we mean a population whose counting and arriving at a definite concrete number is not only impractical, but sometimes impossible, such as the kind of examples that I have given. Then we have what we call homogeneous populations. Homogeneous populations are populations that are uniform in terms of characteristics. For example, if you go to a school and pick male students only, that is a homogeneous population, or female students only, that is a homogeneous population. Or you go to and you pick students from one stage of learning, such as university students alone, then again, that is a homogeneous population. Or you pick primary school students or learners alone, again, that is a homogeneous population. That is, there is a uniformity, uniform identifiers in terms of that particular population. But you also have what we call heterogeneous population. This is a population that have characteristics that are different from each other. For instance, if we pick both male and female students, then heterogeneity will be seen there in terms of gender or in terms of sex. Or we pick students from different levels of studies, such as primary, secondary, colleges and universities, and group them together. Again, that population is heterogeneous because they depict characteristics that are unique to each group but different from other groups. One of the most important terms or concepts that we come across when we are studying population in research is called the universe. And the universe refers to the set of all the units which possess a variable characteristic under study, and they accommodate all the units that possess the characteristic to be studied and have existence in the entire area of research. For example, in a study that seeks to understand factors contributing to drug abuse among college students in Kenya, the universe will be all the college students in Kenya, irrespective of whether or not they use drugs. So that when we talk of a universe, we simply mean everybody else. Or for example, we go to a hospital and all patients admitted in hospital, they become the universe, regardless of whether they suffer from different medical conditions. So that even if a researcher was simply interested in understanding something about patients that are suffering from a specific medical condition, such as diabetes, then the entire population of patients in that given hospital becomes the universe, regardless of whether they suffer from diabetes or not. So when you talk of the universe, we simply mean the entire population of a given group in a given area. Then we have what we call target population. And by target population, we refer to the entire or whole group of individuals or objects to which researchers are interested in making study conclusions about. The target population might also refer to the group of individuals that the researcher intends to conduct research on and draw conclusions from. It is also called theoretical population, and it has varying characteristics. Let us look at some examples for purposes of illustration and for purposes of refining or enhancing our understanding of what target population is. For example, if the research was meant to identify factors contributing to drug abuse in high school in Kenya, then the target population will be all high school students in Kenya engaged in drug abuse. We need to note the difference here between target population and the universe. If this was an example to illustrate the universe could have meant all high school students. But target population is a subset of the universe that meets the specific criteria that the researcher is interested in. In this case, the study aims at understanding issues of drug abuse, and therefore, any student who abuses drug constitutes target population, while those that do not engage in drug abuse do not constitute target population. Instead, both the user and the non-users would constitute what we have discussed earlier, which we call the universe. One other important concept that is commonly used when we are conceptualizing population in research is called accessible population. And by accessible population, we refer to the portion of the population to which the researcher has reasonable access, such as a subset of the target population, and it is composed of members of the target population who are willing to participate and will be available at the time of the study, and in which researchers draw their samples. Let's look at this example for purposes of illustration and also simplifying what we mean by accessible population. For example, a study on factors contributing to alcohol abuse among college students in Kenya. The target population will be, rather the accessible population, will be college students engaged in drug abuse and who are available and willing to participate in the study. In other words, not all students who abuse alcohol in a college setting will constitute accessible population. No, accessible population will only be that set of students that is available and also willing to participate in the study. Certain factors determine the kind of target population or accessible population that we may have. Some of these is budgetary provisions. In other words, how much financial resources is available to the researcher. Because accessing each population and engaging them in terms of collecting data from them has a financial cost to it. So the more respondents or the more population that a researcher brings on board in terms of accessible population, the more financial input is required. So how much money is available will determine the target or rather the accessible population in terms of the numbers that is reachable and that can be persuaded to engage the study. The other one is physical accessibility to the study sample. Some places can be very hostile in terms of very hostile weather that makes it quite difficult for researchers to reach. Although the locals probably are accustomed to the weather and therefore can cope with it. But a researcher who may not be a local person might find it quite difficult to operate within that particular environment. Or some places could be hostile in terms of conflicts, wars, and the rest, and therefore they pose a great risk to the health and the safety of the researchers. In that case, therefore, such areas, even if population are based there and they are willing to engage the study, but inability to reach them physically could compromise, could make it difficult for them to be included as part of the accessible population. Or some areas could be have poor road network, and therefore accessing them might be quite difficult. In that case, again, it might not be possible for the researcher to engage them. Then the other factor is willingness to participate in the study. Remember, we said that accessible means they are available and also willing. They may be available, but not willing to engage the study. If they are available but not willing, then we cannot call it accessible population. So how willing are the samples to engage in the study? Then the last factor is possession of desirable characteristics. Do they have all the characteristics that a researcher considers desirable? Desirable in the sense that it will facilitate generation of ideas or data that makes it possible for the researcher to answer the research objectives. The list that normally constitutes a sampling frame can be actual listing of units or some other description of the population, such as map from which areas will be sampled. For instance, a sampling frame may be a list of contacts in a phone book, list of students in a nominal register at the university or in college, list of voters in a voter register, or list of students in a class register in the case of primary and secondary schools, among others. For example, if one is to study something on factors affecting performance of students in academics in universities in Kenya, then the sampling frame would be the nominal roll that is found in universities, because it is from the nominal roll that the names and details of students are listed, and from which a researcher is able to pick the individuals that he or she wishes to engage in the study. Maybe another example, if one wants to understand in a given electoral area factors that voters consider when they are considering different contestants for different political offices, then the voter register that is found in that particular area becomes the sampling frame. So when we talk about fan sampling frame, we are simply referring it to a unit from which the list of actual participants that can be engaged for purpose of data collection can be obtained. The other issue that is also prominently mentioned or used in research and in population, or when we're defining population, is called a sampling unit. And a sampling unit refers to the individual elements or groups that are selected from a larger population to be included in a study. And it is considered as a basic unit that is selected from the population. For example, a study that is examining strategies employed by universities, say to control consumption of alcohol and drugs, will have individual university as the sampling unit. Take another case, such as a study examining household strategies of controlling substance and drugs consumption at household level, then households become the sampling unit. Similarly, if a study seeks to understand strategies employed by county governments in Kenya to control embezzlement of funds, then individual county government will be the sampling unit for that kind of study. Lastly, a study that seeks to understand strategies employed by students to guard against drug abuse in colleges will have individual students as the sampling unit. So that when you talk about sampling unit, we simply mean the entity that a researcher will focus on in terms of picking the individuals or the elements that will constitute the study sample. That is what we call the sampling unit. The last concept or term that is also used when we are conceptualizing population in research is called unit of analysis. And by unit of analysis, we refer to an object of study within a research and which a researcher uses to describe and draw conclusions of the study. For example, a researcher that seeks to investigate factors affecting household decision on use of solar energy as a source of power, then the unit of analysis would be the households. Again, a unit of analysis is therefore the entity that a researcher wishes to say something about the outcomes and conclusions of the study. It is basically the entity whose views the researcher wants to make, to use and answer and say something about the outcomes of the study. In other words, research speaks on behalf of a given unit of analysis. So a unit of analysis is the one whose views the researcher presents as presenting the possible findings of the study. This concept, unit of analysis, I have dedicated a specific slide for it, where we again will spare time and look at it in details. And therefore, I want to invite listeners to look at the slide on unit of analysis, where I have explained in details what it is, how it is selected, and the various types of units of analysis. Up to that point, I want to thank all of you for listening to me, and we come to the end of our presentation on how population research is conceptualized. Thank you so much for your time.